Okay, so we are starting up tonight. Welcome, everybody. We are going to officially start in a few minutes, just to give enough time for everybody to join us on YouTube. But you're joining us tonight with our consultation about the post-COVID recovery in Toronto. And we are in consultation with people from the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild and other city staff from the COVID task force, COVID response task force, and Lynn Adamson is with me, and this is being hosted by ClimateFast. So I'm going to just give us another minute or two before we officially start. But if Lynn, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webcast tonight. We've done 3 webcasts before now, one for Earth Day, one for the Africa Climate Action Initiative on May 7th, and one for Environment Day on June 5th. You can find these webcasts, and they are all broken up as well into the short individual presentations on our YouTube channel, which is ClimateFast Action. On YouTube, and we invite you to take a look. We've had really excellent panels. And if you attended the one on the latest one that we did on Environment Day, we've just sent out a survey today to ask if you would give us some feedback. We're always looking for feedback because we plan to do more webcasts. So tonight is a little bit different because this is a consultation rather than just presentations and Q&A. This is an opportunity for you to speak up about the things that matter to you, about the city, as we're going through quite a big change. And that is why this special task force has been set up, because there's quite an impact on the city from COVID. And our concern is that we not lose the momentum that we have in terms of climate action at the city. So we're really pleased to have 2 staff with the Transform TO program on the call with us tonight, on the screen with us tonight as well. And so you will have the chance to ask questions and to make comments. Because we're doing this through YouTube, it's a little bit different than if you were in the Zoom room, but we want your participation, we'll want your questions, we'll want your comments. And there are additional ways. Once you've heard the presentations tonight, you may want to give more input to the city, which you'll be able to do through a survey link, or through sending in a letter or submission, and we'll give you the email address for that at some point tonight as well. So we really do, it's the first time we've done a consultation like this online, so we really welcome your participation, and we look forward to the discussion that will follow the presentations. And I will just end by saying that we're just extremely pleased that so many city staff are willing to join us tonight, want to hear from citizens, and want to make sure we understand where we are at the city, what the options and choices that will have to be looked at in the next little while at the city. So I think that's about what I'd like to say for starters. Do you want me to do the land acknowledgement now, Rosemary? Because I could do that.
We will do that in just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to formally acknowledge we're starting our meeting now. I'm assuming everyone, or most people who want to join us on YouTube are in here, and I just do want to explain one more time for those that are just joining that to participate in the YouTube chat, and that so you participate through the YouTube chat, and your questions or your ideas when we get to the part about hearing from you, and your ideas of how we can have a just recovery in our city. They will come through the YouTube chat, and Lynn will be the one who will be reading them. And there is someone taking notes for us, and these will be emailed to the Eventbrite registrants a little bit later. And eventually a recording of this will, probably in a couple of days, a recording of this will also appear on our ClimateFast Action, what's it called? ClimateFast Action YouTube channel. And so, yes, with that, I will hand it over to Lynn to send an acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We note that Takaranto, which is a more original name for Toronto, is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississauga of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. The area is covered with the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which is an Indigenous treaty that is about sharing the land peacefully and not taking more than we need. And I would just like to say that for us, it's really important that we respect the wisdom that is offered to us by Indigenous peoples and include Indigenous peoples in all of the work that we do and respect the treaty relationship that we have. Thank you. I'd like to say that. If I could just say maybe one or two more things about ClimateFast before we start, just so people know who ClimateFast is. I would just say that check out our website, climatefast.ca, and find out about the many projects we do, because we work at the municipal level like we're doing tonight. We also work at the federal and provincial levels. We have an initiative called Kitchen Table Climate Conversations, and we're working on a number of other initiatives and outreach. We are also working on our own anti-racism project with ourselves to review our organization and be in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and all of the changes that need to take place to make our society safer for everyone. Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, and there's things we can do to make the city safer. So we're doing that as well because it fits in with our commitment to a better future for all. So do check out, and we welcome volunteers to be part of ClimateFast, and you can find more information on the website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. We're just going to briefly now go over the agenda so everybody knows what we're looking at tonight and how things are going to go. And I'm going to share my screen. I am hoping. There we go. That should be okay. Everyone can see that. So this evening's agenda, we've already on to item number 4 because we welcomed and had our land acknowledgement. So tonight we will be starting off. I am just going to briefly review. Sorry, I'm trying to make this roll down. It doesn't want to for me. I'm going to have to touch my screen. I'm going to briefly review the objectives that we have with this consultation as far as ClimateFast sees it, and briefly go over the just recovery principles. And then somebody from Transform TO, Sarah and Tamara will be, sorry, Tamara and Megan will be briefly giving us an update and talk about the connections with the recovery and the rebuild plans. And there'll be a short period for Q&A. We're also going to then have a presentation by Sarah from the city, and she is with the TORR Office of Recovery and Rebuild. And she will go over the discussion guide that has been put together for tonight, a little bit more insight into recovery and rebuild and the TORR Office of Recovery and Rebuild and what they are doing. And then we're going to start our discussions. These are the two main questions we're going to be discussing tonight. I thought we should know in advance what they are, so keep them in mind when you are listening to the presentations. So the first thing that we would like you to give us feedback on is to tell us about the action you would like the city to consider in its recovery and rebuilding work, and why this is important work, important action to happen. And our second question, there'll be about 15 minutes for that. And then our second question will be, what priorities do you like to see the city work with the federal and provincial governments on, and why? Because we know there's going to have to be a lot of sort of intergovernmental cooperation. And then there's going to be a third question that's your homework. And I'm not going to tell you what that is yet, because I'm a teacher, and every good teacher doesn't give the kids their homework ahead of time, or they won't pay attention during the day. So, but that is something we won't discuss. I'd like you to take back to your group I imagine many of you are with different groups, environmental groups or neighborhood groups, and this is a question about how your group can contribute to the recovery. So that is that. I will stop sharing, I hope. There we go. And yes, so now we're going to just move into really briefly, because I'm conscious of time, just discuss for a minute about the just recovery and about our understanding of what this ClimateFast understanding of what the post-COVID recovery should be. We really believe in the principles of the just recovery for all, the 6 principles that many organizations have endorsed, including ClimateFast, and 2 of ClimateFast members were on the working committee that developed these. So I think our conversations, when we come talking about recovery, whether at the city level or the national level or the province, should keep in mind these principles and be guided by these principles. I am going to try to make this come up on the screen again, but I was having trouble making it come up, the just recovery principles. So if you will just give me a second. I actually will just read them out. There's a really pretty graphic, and I believe that in the YouTube chat, you're being given the link to the Just Recovery site where you could look over these as well. So the first one is to put people's health and well-being first, no exceptions. So we need to ensure all our policies and programs address the social, economic, and environmental determinants of health and are responsive to the climate emergency, which is in itself a health crisis. The second principle is to strengthen the social safety net and provide relief directly to people. So we need to prioritize redistributive policies and social services that meet the immediate and long-term needs of all people and eliminate social, economic, and wealth inequalities. Thirdly, we need to prioritize the needs of workers and communities. These programs must support a just transition away from fossil fuels that creates decent work and leaves no one behind. The fourth principle is to build resilience to prevent future crises. We recognize that we cannot recover from the COVID crises by entrenching systems that will cause the next crisis. So we must invest in sustainable infrastructure and build resiliency within communities, ensuring that people can access public essential services, meet their basic needs, and engage in cultural and artistic expression. And the final principle is to, the fifth principle is to build solidarity and equity across communities, generations, and borders. And we recognize that in a globalized world, what happens to one of us matters to all of us. Recovery and rebuild must be guided by principles of equity, solidarity, and sustainability across domestic and international relations. And the sixth principle is to uphold Indigenous rights and work in partnership with Indigenous peoples. Recovery and rebuild must uphold Indigenous rights and include full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples in line with the standards of free, prior, and informed consent. So, as I said, we need to keep these principles in mind as we decide how we should best let Toronto rebuild, recover, rebuild, build back better, as a lot of people are saying. And with that, I am going to hand it over to and Tamara from Transform TO. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's Tamara here from the city. So I'm just going to share my screen. Please let me know. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So my name is Tamara Grasuti. I work for the City of Toronto's Environment and Energy Division. I normally work in the role of Climate Action Engagement Lead. I have been working with the COVID task force at the city for the past 3 months, but slowly just getting back into my role. So really happy to join everyone tonight, and thank you for ClimateFast for organizing this. So just wanted to provide a very brief overview of Transform TO and provide a few updates as we were asked by the organizers today, and then I'll pass this on to my colleague Sarah, who's currently at the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild, who'll be able to speak in a little more detail about what the city has planned and the consultation guide. I'm sure quite a few of you know about Transform TO already, but I just figured I'd cover it in case there's still new people joining us tonight. Transform TO is the name for the City of Toronto's Climate Change Action Strategy. It was unanimously adopted in 2017, which is very exciting for us because we don't have our councillors often voting unanimously for a lot of things. It was received full budget in 2018 and has since been implemented. It continues to be implemented. There's a lot of work that's already ongoing as a part of Transform TO implementation. A lot of it is led by our division in the environment and energy. A lot of it includes community engagement like this, some climate action grants for the neighborhood improvement areas, a lot of work in residents' energy efficiency, a lot of collaboration with different sectors, including building sectors and different levels of government. And if you want to find out more, there's a link at the end of this, a few of my slides. So feel free to just visit transformto.ca or contact myself and my colleague, and I'll share our contact information at the end of this part of the presentation. So we're asked to provide just a very brief update on what's going on with reporting around the city's climate action strategy. So initially, there was planned to be a Transform TO update report that was supposed to go to Committee and Council in May of 2020. But unfortunately, that was right around the time when COVID response was immediately needed at the city. So that has been delayed. We are just awaiting kind of final confirmation from the senior leadership team at the city, as well as council, for confirmation when that report is going forward. We expect to be able to share the news imminently. We were hoping to have it confirmed for today, but it didn't really work out. In the meantime, this doesn't mean the fact that the report was delayed doesn't mean that the work is not ongoing. Our division and a lot of different divisions of the city are still working on implementing Transform TO. While we did slow down a little bit in our kind of community engagement work over the last few months, it is ramping up now. The help program that Stuart that normally works in, is fully going ahead. There's a lot of collaboration and new kind of innovative research that's going on as a part of COVID response. So you feel good about the fact that the work does continue to go on, even though the report is a bit delayed. At the same time, I'm sure many of you may remember the previous October when the city declared a climate emergency. And so we were directed by council to actually report back with Transform TO net zero strategy. So initially, the Transform TO goal was to identify a pathway for us to reach an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by the year 2050. But the strategy will aim to identify that pathway and different strategies to get us to a net zero goal by 2050 or before then. So this plan, we anticipate to go to committee or council in early 2021. It will include some new and exciting technical scenario modeling, as well as lay out different policy options and programs that will need to be put in place for this more aggressive reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I also just wanted to provide a little bit more context on what's going on in climate action in Toronto in general and around other municipalities around the world, just because it would be useful for this specific conversation tonight. So I'm sure quite a lot of you are aware, have been reading the news, that we are seeing a greenhouse gas emission reduction due to behavior change in these COVID times. Obviously, a lot of it isn't necessarily super positive, as a lot of people are unable to commute to work because they have found themselves out of jobs. But we are seeing emission reduction worldwide. It seems that reductions can be as high as 17%. However, we do anticipate that once cities recover and urban centers continue to recover, that gap will be closed. And so we don't anticipate the overall annual emission reductions to be too high. In the exciting news around active transportation, we are seeing a lot of very positive behavior change and accelerated installation of cycling infrastructure in many municipalities, including Toronto. In Toronto, I'm sure a lot of you have been paying attention about the active TORR program implementation, as well as the cycling plan that went to committee and council last month and was adopted with the support by the majority of council. So we're expecting over 25 kilometers of new cycling infrastructure to be installed at the city. And just today, Mayor Tory announced that 2 of those projects have actually been accelerated. And so we are going to be seeing, I think, close to 2 kilometers on cycling infrastructure being installed on Bloor and around University Avenue in time for the weekend and for the city of Toronto entering stage 2, which is super exciting. And then finally, just for a bit of a global context, C40 is a collaborative group of different megacities around the world that are committed to climate action. And so Toronto is a part of C40. And as a part of their COVID-19 recovery task force, they identified a statement of principles for a recovery in which we will be able to rebuild our cities and economies in a way that improves public health, reduces inequality, and addresses climate crisis. And Mayor Tory has endorsed that statement of principles and has mentioned that he's committed to not returning to kind of business as usual and ensuring that we have a just, healthy, and equitable climate and COVID recovery. So I think that's useful context for some of the discussions for today. So I know that was very quick, but I want to make sure that there's a lot of time for the discussion portion of today. So if you have any questions, I guess we can take some now, but if you'd like to think a bit more, and as many of you are part of some community organizations or interested in getting involved in more climate action work, myself and my colleague Megan, whose contact information are just on the slides, our primary jobs, which we're going back to full-time next week, are to actually just support climate action engagement just like this. So please don't be shy to ever reach out to us by email, and we'll be happy to chat with you. I guess now we can take some questions.
Okay, so Lynn, are there any questions as of yet? For Tamara?
I'm not seeing any questions as of yet in the chat. I've had an introduction. Jacques is from Etobicoke and is a promoter of clean technologies and sustainability. So Jacques, do you have any questions? Or we have 30 people on the YouTube. So if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat. Any questions for Tamara?
I'm also staying on, so we can also proceed with Sarah's presentation and just respond to questions afterwards together, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds excellent, because a lot of what you say overlaps, and I imagine in terms of how we're working together with Transform TO and with the Toronto Office of Recovery and which I'm just going to call TORR for short from now on.
That is what it's called.
Knows what that means now.
We like our acronyms very much.
Yes, they always have to have TO in them somewhere. So we're going to give Sarah.
Yeah, just before you go on, looks like we do have a question from Amina. Amina is typing out a question, so do you just want to hold on a sec?
Yeah, no worries.
And Amina is a member of Friday for Future, so I'm assuming.
Oh, great.
a
Yeah.
question from the youth, as they say.
Wonderful.
Amina, do you want more time to do your question?
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah. Rosemary, do we have, I think maybe we could just say from the ClimateFast point of view that we've been really very pleased to be able to work with Transform TO since 2015, when Transform TO was just an idea at that point, and there were a lot of consultations around the city to get people's input in the design of this program. And it's absolutely so wonderful that we have a climate action program of the quality of Transform TO and with the ambition of Transform TO and the careful planning that we see the staff doing to work on some of the core areas, which are buildings, transportation, and green garbage. So we're working on these things, and we're working on it together. So we just try to bring in the citizen voice. And it's really important. Everyone should know that talking to your own personal counselor about this matter, if this bothers you, if this is important to you, and you want the city to keep working on climate, it's really important for you to convey that to your counselors so they know. Because we did, over a couple of years, I think, manage to speak to enough counselors that they understand that Torontonians do care, and there's now a very good level of support among council, but we want to keep it there. So I'll just say that it's really important to be in touch with your counselor and the mayor's office as well. Send Mayor Tory an email when you're thinking about these concerns. So mayor_Tory at toronto.ca, and for your counselor, it's counselor _ their last name at toronto.ca. So it's not too hard to reach them, and it's important for them to know that you care about this. The city's going to have some really big changes that are going to have to take place coming up, and our support is going to be needed. So Amina has a question up. It says, she says, as a student that regularly before the pandemic used the TTC, it's important in this transition to have affordable transit. And the second part is, as living costs continue to rise, how will the recovery plan advocate for lower TTC fares?
So I don't know if one of my TORR colleagues wants to respond to this, but Stuart?
So I can take that. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. And I'll invite the, if you want to add anything. But I think what Sarah and I have been seeing from the consultation we've done already is that transportation has been one of those sort of immediate responses to the pandemic, right? As Tamara alluded to in, not alluded to, said plainly, quite plainly and rightly in the introduction, that you know, I think the acceleration of key things like active PO has come about because of the pandemic. One of the things that's happening also too is a mobility table has been, you know, sort of struck for this purpose. Staff from our office are engaged in that and are advising on that. But the other thing I can let you know is that through the TORR work, equity and you know, considerations of, you know, special determinants of health and other factors are sort of key. There's actually just a discussion today around ensuring that equity is central to what TORR recommends. And I guess part of that is, you know, the affordability of transit. So, you know, I think, you know, it remains to be seen exactly how this document will run out. But I think you rest assured that one, equity is a key concern to the TORR office as it relates to transportation equity and costs, affordability, et cetera. And I think, you know, the other thing that's important to make is that transportation and a lot of thinking around transportation and mobility is happening now as a response and a longer term recovery and rebuild piece. Folks may have also seen there's been a lot of discussion around opportunities for accelerating work around bus rapid transit. Again, still, you know, a lot of that's yet to be worked out. But I just want to let Amina know that, you know, equity living costs, and costs related to transportation services are being taxed. Sorry, a long-winded response, but hopefully helpful.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And I will say that there are other questions in the chat and comments. And our timekeeper, I will have to say, has sent me a message saying we should keep going with the presentations.
Yeah.
So I will hold on to those questions. We will hold on to those questions and comments for a little later in the program. So let's just thank Tamara. Wonderful. Take care. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And so we will have Sarah's presentation now from TORR.
Yes, so I will still use the slides. I'm just going to put myself on mute. Sarah?
Hi there. Can everybody hear me okay?
That's good.
Yes. All right. Hi, I'm Sarah Gingrich. I'm here, as you heard, with my colleague Stuart Dutfield. The two of us are usually with the City of Toronto Environment and Energy Division with Tamara and Megan. Currently, we are reassigned to the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild, which, as you heard, we like to call it TORR because it's quicker. And TORR was set up this spring to coordinate and provide advice on how the City of Toronto should approach COVID recovery and rebuild. And the big deliverable at this point is a report providing advice to the city, which is expected in September. So that is currently what TORR is working towards. And TORR is made up from staff across the city and elsewhere. And I'll tell you a little bit in a moment about how TORR is, what themes we're focused on. Next slide, please. So the discussion guide is available on the city's website, and we'll just pause here for a moment so people who want to take a look at it can do that. If you go to the city's website, toronto.ca/recovery-rebuild, you'll see the TORR discussion guide there. There are also some other resources there. For the month of June, TORR has been doing a lot of engagement with residents, with different organizations. And there's a survey at that website that we invite you and encourage you to fill out and to share, and encourage other residents and organizations to please fill out. There's also a discussion guide, which is there. If you go to that link, you click on how to get involved, you click on tools and resources, and then discussion guide. You'll see it there in two different formats. It's there on the website, and there's also a PDF that you can download if you wish. In terms of TORR, well, will people look that up if they want? TORR is set up under 5 themes. So there's staff working on a theme called Divisions, Agencies, Climate, Resilience, and Equity. And that is the group that Stuart and I are a part of. And the reason we're here today is we're tasked with making sure that the city's recovery and rebuild plans meaningfully incorporate climate and resilience over the shorter and the longer term. The second TORR theme is community and strategic alliances, and there's a focus there on working with and engaging with vulnerable communities. The third theme is government and financial renewal. So that's about how does the government itself need to change, and how should the city work through the current financial situation. Fourth theme is business, culture, and inspire. And the fifth theme is reconciliation and Indigenous engagement. So those are the themes of TORR. And of course, all of these themes are working together. Next, please. So I'll go through this quickly because it is also outlined in the guide. The Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild and the city's strategy is really based on public health objectives and public health conditions. So the city is able to move forward with restart, recovery, and rebuild when certain public health conditions are met. And I should mention that public health and public health knowledge is certainly integral to what the city and TORR are doing. Next, please. So the TORR office is set up to do three major things. Number one is coordinate a citywide approach to recovery and rebuild, and make sure that that approach is innovative and, again, built on public health. The second major activity is engaging with stakeholders, residents, communities, and organizations to make sure that information is flowing both ways and that the city's approach is based on the best possible strategy and information. And then the third major focus is leveraging the subject matter and operational expertise and support within the city and within partners and agencies to make sure we're working together. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we're building on and adjusting what we have to really move forward together. And some of what we've seen so far is redeployment of staff from, to essential or urgent areas like long-term care, shelters, that sort of thing. And there's also an effort underway to make sure we're really talking to all parts of the city and partners to build the best strategy that can be built. Next, please. So there are three major steps that the city is working through in terms of COVID recovery and rebuild. The first step, of course, restart, reopen, and we've seen some of that happening with city services restarting under new conditions, and also in the community businesses and programs and facilities opening up. The second stage is the recovery phase, and this, of course, is working with all levels of government to support economic recovery as the pandemic begins to subside. And in terms of climate and resilience, one of the things that TORR is really trying to focus on in the recovery phase is we want to understand, and we'd like to hear from ClimateFast and your members, what are the particular barriers to climate action that have been put up by COVID, and what needs to be done to remove those barriers and maintain the current progress on climate action through the shorter term recovery period. The third phase is the rebuild, reimagine phase, and this is very much about exploring opportunities, new ideas, new ways that the city can move ahead. And in terms of in terms of climate and resilience, here what we're looking at is we'd really like to hear from you, through your expertise, your knowledge, your passion, your experience, how can the city, how should the city build back better? So in terms of climate and resilience, how do we reach the city's net zero GHG target by 2050? How do we move ahead while supporting recovery and while supporting long-term rebuild? This I won't go into too much depth. There are different responsibilities and roles for different levels of government, municipal, provincial, federal. All these three levels are working together. And in your guide, you'll see this outline of which major responsibilities fall with each level. That might be a useful resource when you're developing your advice for the city. So in terms of the questions in the guide, Rosemary and Lynn have already outlined the questions that you're going to be asked tonight through ClimateFast. In the guide, in the TORR Consultation Guide, there are some questions as well that might get you thinking. So the first question is, what are the priorities for you, your community, organization, or business to effectively recover and rebuild, and why are those your priorities? Another question, what have you, your community, etc., done in response to the pandemic that the city could learn from and build on? So what are those really inspiring successes or very practical measures that you've seen or that you've put in place that you really want other people to know about and you'd like to see replicated? Another question, tell us more about the actions you would like the city to consider in its recovery and rebuild work. And so that's one of the, I think, the key questions you've been asked to think about tonight. Next, please. So another question in the discussion guide creating this powerful sentence. So we'd love to hear ClimateFast and your members' versions of this sentence. What is your advice? The sentence is, I would like to see the city, I would like the city to address the following issue by taking the following action and make the city better in the following ways. So we'd love to hear from you, as I already said. Next slide, please. In terms of a little bit more on climate and resilience, so at TORR, the Climate and Resilience Group, as I mentioned, we're really focused on engaging with residents and organizations and partners to hear and learn as much as we can about advice while we're developing recommendations on two major areas. The first is recommendations to address barriers and maintain progress on climate action while supporting COVID recovery. So that is over the short term. The second group of recommendations are on accelerating progress on climate action and building back better. So what can the city do to really recover, rebuild, while pushing towards the city's goals on greenhouse gas net zero and resilience goals as well. So these recommendations are being informed by a whole range of sources of information, certainly the TORR consultation, climate and resilience consultations that are taking place, as well as consultations throughout the other TORR themes. There's a lot of coordination going on within TORR between the themes to make sure that, for example, the government and finance renewal theme is really thinking about how can they help the city move ahead with climate and resilience while they're working on their government and financial renewal work, for example. The Transform TO strategy, as well as the public consultation and stakeholder consultation that was undertaken by Environment and Energy Division last year, that is a very important input into the TORR climate and resilience recommendations, as well as the resilience strategy of City of Toronto and the engagement that went into developing that strategy. So there was a lot of really powerful feedback that went into those processes, and we're using that information. And I did want to note that in terms of resilience, TORR has taken a broad definition for resilience. So climate resilience is certainly a very important component, but TORR is also addressing and creating recommendations to address neighborhood resilience, community resilience. So there's a very strong focus, as Stuart mentioned, on equity. Next slide, please. And so finally, this is a little summary of the ways that we invite you to provide input to TORR. Again, toronto.ca/recovery rebuild. There is a survey there that we encourage you to complete. We encourage you to share. It is open until September 30th. So we also encourage you to take a look at it soon, please. If ClimateFast, your members, your partners and contacts would like to provide other input to the city, we encourage you to do that by email or by mail. And if there is a desire or a need for the survey in another language, that is available as well by contacting 311. So thank you, and I and my colleagues would be very happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I just want to make a clarification. You said the survey is open until September 30th. Do you mean June 30th?
Yep, that was 100% wrong. I meant June 30th. Thank you.
Okay.
June 30th.
Thanks. So Lynn, we only have a minute or two before we're supposed to move on, but are there any questions for Sarah? Lynn, are there any questions for Sarah? We only have about
Yes, sorry.
a minute.
Yes, there are. Laura's asking, have Transform TO targets been strengthened? If yes, is there a revised list, buildings, transit, etc., that will add up to 0 by 2050? Bold goals are great. Bold goals are great, but we need actions. It's from Laura.
Sure, I can address that. So in October 2019, City Council declared climate emergency and changed Transform TO's goal to net zero GHG emissions by 2050, and asked us to also explore by 2040. That work and the work to update the specific goals in Transform TO, that work is being undertaken now. So there is a net zero, as Tamara mentioned, there's a modeling effort underway for Transform TO net zero strategy, and that includes doing that work to update those specific sector goals.
Okay, and can I do one more question? Helen from Parkdale High Park for Climate Action asks, does the city have a plan to include communities and local organizations as partners in implementing the policies developed through TORR?
Yes, I will answer that, and if Stuart has anything to add, please do. One of the themes in TORR is very focused on community engagement, and there is a network that has been developed through the city's social development, finance and administration organization that is reaching out to a wide variety of organizations. I'm aware I'm being a bit vague. Did Tamara or Megan or Stuart have more specific information? The short answer is yes, that effort is very much underway. We'd also like to really add new contacts and partners wherever we can.
Yes, Sarah, sorry, can you guys hear me? I can add as well. I'll just be very brief. So Helen, feel free to just reach out to Megan and myself directly. We can chat offline as well. But in short, what Sarah said, SDFA, which is usually the division that leads the neighborhood planning tables around different neighborhood improvement areas in the city, has sort of partnered with a number of different organizations across the whole city and developed this kind of cluster approach. They have 13 different clusters of across the city where they work with essentially like as many agencies as they're in touch with to develop recovery plans, respond to any needs, as well as to develop policies for moving forward. Myself and Megan actually involved in that work right now with a climate action lens, and so we're developing a policy to help sort of respond to communities' different needs through climate action and our resources as well. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But feel free to connect with us sort of offline for more information because we're looking to partner with more community organizations in that work.
Can I ask one more question at this point? So Anne is asking, in a city as multilingual as Toronto, I want to ask if Transform TO has the capacity to do outreach in languages other than English, or are you considering this?
I can start to respond to that, and others can add in if they wish. It's definitely, we acknowledge the fact that the city has done a very kind of historically poor job in making a lot of our programs and work available in different languages. That is something that we're working on, and we're working on as a part of Transform TO community engagement that Megan and I lead. So yes, the answer is yes. If there's any specific shortcomings that you have identified in regards to your community's needs specifically, again, feel free to just connect with us, and we're happy to kind of respond on that per need basis as well. Yeah, we strive to be better.
Thank you. There are more questions, but I'm wondering, do we need to
I think we need to move.
go on? Yes, and we'll hold these questions. We'll get
behind.
to them. We will get to them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking also that if we don't get to every question, I'm sure people are free to contact Tamara and Sarah, and I believe your emails were.
Yes, our emails, I shared them in the presentation, and I'm happy to send them along as well. And we're happy to kind of be the conduit for responding. Again, Megan's and my job is primarily to connect to community members and help respond to their concerns or interests in climate action. So happy to just respond to anything by email or phone or whatever. I'll share our information with you again afterwards.
Okay, and I'm sure that our YouTube chat monitors are making sure that that gets into the YouTube chat. So yes, we do have to move to the first discussion question. So now this is not so much the viewers and the participants on YouTube asking questions. They're going to be trying to answer the questions. They're giving out their ideas that the city has put forward. And these questions do come from the discussion guide that Sarah had been speaking about before. So I showed you the first question briefly when I went through the agenda, but I'll repeat it. So the first question that we have is a sort of open-ended question. Tell us about the actions you would like the city to consider in its recovery and rebuilding work and why. So I don't know if we already have something there, Lynn, but Lynn will be reading what comes across on YouTube. We have, or through the YouTube monitor, who will send them to her.
I will say that Anita is saying, will there continue to be financial support for Transform TO, to fully fund Transform TO, given the pressures the city is under? So that's her concern. I could add to it because it's also about money.
Or, sorry, I just wanted to clarify the format. Did you want us to respond to this, or is this more of a discussion part? Just let us know if you want us to speak.
Okay, well, I think that there's a question about financial support that the city has for Transform TO. There's another question about funds available from the federal and provincial governments. Rita's asking, do they have funds earmarked for our recovery?
Okay.
Those are both the financial questions. How do we want to do those?
Well, the second part of that question, I think we should get into more in the second question, because that's when we're talking about the city partnering with the provincial and federal government.
Okay.
But hold on to that.
Okay, so we do
But
have
are there
one.
anybody coming up with ideas of what they'd like to see in the recovery and rebuilding?
Here's one. Have you heard about Acer's Peel pilot for low tree canopy and high social needs neighborhoods underway as Project Crossroads? That's Alice from Acer bringing up that program. I guess Alice is probably suggesting that we do that in Toronto as well, as Peel is doing. That's one.
We are taking notes. It's ClimateFast, but I understand that Stuart is also taking notes of all your suggestions.
Okay, so there's another question. How will the city support micro-mobility options, including small electric vehicles other than cars? And another question about electrification of public transit. PHP4C, not sure what that is, but that's the question is about electric vehicles and electrification of public transit.
Sarah, I'm happy to sort of jump in.
Yes, sorry, I guess I wasn't 100% sure if we're if we're in the response moment right now, but if it's useful for us to respond, we can definitely do that.
Yeah. If you feel there's something that will add to the discussion, it would be very much appreciated. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, then Stuart, feel free to, of course, go ahead.
Sure, yes, and please tell me to shut up. You too. Again, coming back to the question of sort of mobility, the easy answer is micromobility is coming up a lot. The electrification of public transit, the electrification writ large of building systems is coming up. I guess the question remains exactly how that will flow, how that will happen. But I think we are hearing a lot about electrification, and it's, ClimateFast and its members, I think you guys would be behind this, so we would certainly welcome your ideas on that, or if you are echoing the support of anyone else, please just let us know. I think I also saw an earlier question around, the power grid. I can't recall exactly what it was, but I think, with respect to Transform TO and ensuring to get towards net zero, a clean, carbon-free electricity grid is key to this. And so I think that's something else that is being considered in terms of the longer term net zero modeling is basically how clean or dirty it is. So I think what we want and what we need to hit those targets is a clean electricity grid and ensuring that everything we have is powered by clean energy. So please do feel free to answer that.
Yep. And thank you, Stuart. We do have a couple of more comments in response to question 1. So let's have them now. We've got provide more funding for outdoor programming for children and youth, like the forest schools, safer and healthier for children, and would increase connections to nature throughout their lives. So that's one. There's another one that Lorna has here. I think mental health, and in particular the mental health of children, should not be forgotten in climate plans. So I think, Lorna, if you have additional ideas about what specifically would help mental health that's related to climate plans, please send that along in the chat as well. But Lorna wants us to think about mental health. Laura says, I'd like to see stormwater greenery, drainage, bike lanes, green spaces, etc., with every project, buildings, road repairs, etc., building climate mitigation everywhere. So that may come back to the question of how Transform TO can have a liaison in every department. So all the planning decisions are looked at with a climate lens. So I know that's something that the city is aspiring to. So you might comment as to how you think that's coming along in terms of looking at everything, every opportunity for climate mitigation.
Yeah, Lynn, as I think maybe a few of you know, so the council in the direction for the climate emergency did also direct for us to apply climate lens to all of city's operations. So that includes things like procurement as well as different city policies. So we have a whole unit actually in our division now, you'll be happy to hear, that's sort of dedicated to that work. They will be creating sort of recommendations of how that's integrated in every decision and policy that takes place at the city.
Thank you. That's what I see under question 1. We have a couple of people watching the chat. Do you see any additional responses under question 1 for the moment? Otherwise, maybe we should go to question 2, because we can always come back and add more.
Yeah, we're actually pretty much almost right on schedule to move to question 2. So we're actually a minute ahead. So we might as well just get on to question 2. But yeah, we can always circle back to that if people have further ideas. That's really quite a wide-ranging question with all sorts of possible answers. But the whole idea is to get the discussion going and getting all of us thinking in different ways so that when we do fill in our survey or the submission, we can always write an email submission to recoveryrebuild@toronto.ca is the email, and I know that address is being put in the YouTube chat. So we'll move on to question 2, and this is talking about federal and provincial government working together. And the question that we'd like you who are watching to consider and give us your ideas is, what priorities would you like to see the city work with the federal and provincial governments on, and why? So I don't know, Lynn, if anybody had already jumped to the next question, but perhaps we could go back to that question about financing with the different levels of government or that
I
comment?
would say yes. Let's go back to that one.
Then
I'm
could you
happy to sort of,
for us so that we are refreshed?
Yeah, the question was about what
Finance.
support we can expect from the federal and provincial governments to back up the city on the climate work.
I'm happy to speak to that with the sort of proviso that a lot of that is still a little unclear, even to us as well. What I can say, and I think what a lot of people have already seen, is that the mayor, members of council, and mayors and members of council from across the GTA have been lobbying hard and advocating for support from the federal and the provincial government at the first step of this, just to manage the sort of operating deficits a lot of us face as a result of the COVID crisis. You folks may have seen last week, actually, the mayor and his colleagues from 6 or 7 other municipalities issued another sort of statement to that effect, saying how critical it was for provincial and federal government to step up in a sense and help the municipalities manage the operating costs. Again, many people may have heard that the city is spending in excess of $63 to $65 million a year, a week in managing the costs associated with COVID, and we're anticipating a $1.5, $1.6 to $2 billion deficit in that regard by the end of the year. So that's pretty significant, even for a city as big as Toronto with an operating budget as big as ours. So that is a chief concern. So I think that is something that is being taken very, very, very seriously. I'm sure mayors and politicians around have also called on citizens and residents of Toronto to advocate to their MPs and MPPs for support. The other part of this conversation I think is relevant is the sort of talk of stimulus. And there is a lot of talk around stimulus for a green and just recovery. I think that a lot of the discourse is around that. And to date, through some of our consultation work, we have engaged with a group that is developing a report that will go to the federal government at the end of June, we believe, in advocating for certain elements of that stimulus and recovery. We've heard that it's unlikely that stimulus dollars will flow before September. What the city is doing, and we can sort of give you some insight on, is the city is pulling together a list of what we consider sort of shovel-worthy and shovel-ready projects, so that when the call for stimulus projects comes, we're ready. We have connected with colleagues from EED, are working with the city manager's office in pulling together that short list of projects. And sort of, while the formal climate lens is still being developed, considerations of climate are actively being considered and identification of those projects.
Thank you, Stuart. I do have a question here from Amina, and she's asking, again, Amina's from Fridays for Future. She's saying, how will the recovery plan increase support for food sovereignty in marginalized communities and neighborhoods? And I think with all these questions, you have the option to say, here's what we're thinking about, or we'll take that into advisement and we'll think about it. But it is definitely a concern, food scarcity and the ability of communities to have more access to fresh food.
I would say it's probably a little out of our wheelhouse in terms of what we've been doing, but it's an important thing to hear. I think food has come up maybe in the early stages of, well, we know it's come up as an issue, but we're happy to include it, with a sort of climate, and like that. If you have any other additional details, please do send them in. And just a note to make, as it relates to the recovery and rebuild sort of email, if you'd be so kind as to either copy myself or Sarah on that email, just so we can actually track it as it comes in. As you can imagine, the office is getting a lot of emails, and we just want to make sure that's the right place.
Are you saying keep track of our questions and comments? Because I think we are saving our chat. We will save the chat.
Sure.
Is that what you mean?
We'll save the chat for sure. I just mean in terms of any emails that get sent in, please either copy Sarah or myself, just to make sure that we just want to make sure, given the volume of emails and correspondence, that we can flag it, around this consultation and climate agreement.
Okay, so use your direct staff emails as well as the general email. That would be good. Thank you. And Anita from Parkdale High Park for Climate Action, she said is asking about building emissions. Since they are the top GHG source in Toronto, is there any consideration on enhancing building retrofits program, HELP, and high RIS, I think RIS, high RIS, and transitioning to renewable energy?
I'm happy to take that one. That's my regular sort of day job, I suppose. So as it relates to health and high rise, those are two, I guess, specific programs that are currently running, although in a sort of slightly modified way. The answer is yes. As a lot of people have seen, a lot of the research, a lot of the advocacy is around building energy retrofitting. HELP is currently, the team I usually work with is actually actively applying for some funding from SPM to enhance our efforts in this regard. The city, the group I'm usually also working in is, although it's slightly slowed down given the pandemic, as you can imagine, working on developing the city's Green Will initiative, which is a sort of a key initiative for the mayor. We do believe that building retrofitting is a huge opportunity. We've been speaking to Toronto Atmospheric Fund or the Atmospheric Fund about that, and also a number of other groups, the Canada Green Building Council, and there's a lot of sort of the other opportunity there we believe is around sort of labor skills development and workforce capacity building. But again, please do send us any additional thoughts or recommendations in that regard, even just points of support. We'll use that to push that as a viable way to build back better.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have a question too, that this one does relate to government, other levels of government. Jacques is asking, is Transform TO pushing the province to enable increased clean, cheap hydropower from Quebec, given the predicted reduced power production from Pickering?
Again, happy to jump in and sort of a tie into sort of an earlier comment. I think this is maybe one that we would recommend you provide comments on if you have some ideas. I think the slide that Sarah shared around the responsibilities of different orders of government is important in this regard. So I guess a couple of things. Again, we want clean sources of fuel powering our electricity grid. We are somewhat dependent to a certain degree on who produces that fuel. The city can advocate for certain things through our Intergovernmental Affairs Office. Again, the messages we need to hear from, hearing from groups sort of can help us amplify that message. But it is a concern, I would say, depending on how the city, how the mix of energy generation changes. A large increase in gas generation would really result in a severe struggle for the city to meet Transform TO goals.
Thank you. I'm going to take another look and see if there's other questions or comments around the relationship to governments, to other levels of government. Let's see. So Laura's asking, can we support the federal government in pushing to meet the Paris goals, leveraging the C4 cities agreement that the mayor has signed, we know that, to find and implement best practices for mitigation and adaptation in cities. Toronto should strive to be a climate leader. Yeah, so that's one. And then provincial government must step up and fund transit in Toronto. There's more, but let's go with those two.
Sorry, just some technical issues. I think the transit one is a very important one. You know, a big part of Toronto's, you know, fare box covers a lot of those revenues for transit, and currently the fare box is not getting a lot of activity. So, you know, please do send in your comments and recommendations in that regard. It is something also the city is actively trying to manage in terms of safely getting people back on transit and managing capacity constraints. Active CO is just, you know, a good way for those people who are able. You know, we're encouraging people to travel that way, visit local businesses. But transit is also a big concern for the city, and again, mobility to transit as it relates to the TORR Office. Big factors moving forward.
Thank you. I have another one about, again, this is about pressuring the provincial government. Laura's saying we need to demand of the provincial government that our electricity grid be 90% plus non-emitting, which will require new renewable energy projects. So I don't know if you have the inside line to the province and you're working on a pushback around the fact that they've canceled all those projects or not. Like, is that dialogue going on? I think that's kind of the question.
Again, happy to just sort of weigh in and others who feel to join. I don't think that's something we have an immediate sense of right now. I would say, you know, the city does regularly provide intergovernmental sort of advice or recommendations or requests to the federal and provincial government. Currently, I would say that a lot of the focus on that communication, as Sarah said, is very COVID related. The key things are currently health and reopening the economy. But I think that's a very valid point to again put forth in anything send to TORR Office through ClimateFast or individuals or organizations to be taken into account. The other thing I'll just mention is that Saad Rafi, who's been asked to sort of lead the TORR effort, is a former deputy minister with the provincial government. That's good in the sense that he understands government and, you know, the intergovernmental relationships. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if Sarah or Tamara wants to add anything.
Okay, so I'm going to take this question. Apparently, some people are having trouble posting on the chat. If you are having trouble posting on the chat, just email Lynn, L-Y-N, that's me, at climatefast.ca, and it will pop up in my email. Okay? Don't know why there's a problem, but I do have one here that's come to me in email. 2050 is too far away as a goal. They worry. This person is talking about the youth in her group, which is Just Earth. The youth in this group worry that we have 11 more years to stop and prevent climate disaster. It's their future, and it can't be in the hands of older people's decisions only. Much faster acceleration is needed. 2030 is less backward, but not 2050.
Sorry, you can go ahead, Sarah.
Very briefly, I think the Transform TO does have a 2030 target That's a very important and ambitious target. I think many would agree with the person who sent in that comment. We would very much like to hear, TORR would very much like to receive, Transform Q would very much like to receive any more advice or comments or specific information that we can bring forward. So if you do have more specific thoughts on that, we would really like to hear them. That's a very good point.
So one opportunity would be for the youth in Just Earth or Just Earth as a full group to put in a submission before June 30th. And it would maybe be good to CC you, Sarah, because you're looking at
Sure.
climate ambition. Yes. Okay. There's a second part to this, and it says, are there any subsidies to the oil and gas industries at the city level?
I wouldn't believe so in terms of direct oil and gas subsidies. The city has developed a green fleet plan and is trying to clean. We do purchase fuel, but I know there's a long-term plan to make sure, one, the fuel we purchase is a lot cleaner, and slowly but surely transition how we power our vehicles. The city's got a big pilot right now with the TTC fleets. The buses along the street I live near are electric, and there's a lot of efforts under that way. But I don't believe we're providing any subsidies directly or indirectly to anyone really. So I think we're fine on the fossil fuel front.
So the city is not a direct part of the problem in terms of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, but certainly right now the federal government is under pressure to give money to the fossil fuel industry, which is suffering, right? And a big part of the principles for a just recovery that ClimateFast supports, and so many groups support, I think over 400 groups have signed on to this principles for a just economic recovery, so that no money would go to subsidies to oil and gas at the federal level, and that federal money would come for equitable projects at the city level and where needed throughout the country. So putting people and planet first, putting health first. And so I think that's the sentiment that has come with that comment. So we do have another comment, and that is Paul is asking, what more can be done to create public support for and participation in accelerated implementation of climate solutions in Toronto, such as building retrofits? Recommend the provincial and federal government provide more financial support to Toronto for building retrofits. And I believe there's a fund at the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, but I'm understanding, because we did have a meeting with Adam Vaughan, the MP, and he told us there was $1 billion fund at the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, but we actually would need 12 to 16 billion. I have been told by Guy Dauncey, who's working on these issues, in order to actually really do a building retrofit program at scale to what we need. So the money is perhaps coming some through this, I suppose you could say, third party, that the city can access, but it seems like it's a very limited fund. So what can you say about that? Like, is anybody putting together the money that's really needed for this to do it at scale?
I think we would there would be a similar sense that the scale of things needs to be a lot bigger. I think, what we're hoping to get to, and what we know, I think to a certain degree intuitively, is that, through the net zero modeling coming in, is that the scale of investment that will be required is much more massive than, municipal governments, especially one that's struggling right now, could manage. But that provincial and federal governments will be required, and that private investment will also be urgent, is a key part of that. What I think is positive is, as I'm sure you guys have seen, the economic rationale for that is strong. There was a report just released yesterday from the International Energy Association or agency that basically said that we need to invest in a green recovery, and that the green recovery will more than pay dividend. I guess the challenge is maybe, for government is spreading stimulus across the country. And is there a question around, should Toronto get more than one area or another, depending on how badly we've been impacted, or our ability to leverage that given the size of our economy? We are one of the economic engines of the country. So I think it is an important consideration, and groups, I think groups speaking out to the scale of the action that is required is important. And again, happy to ingest those comments around the level of ambition that's required in ensuring our rebuild and recovery actions are sort of sufficient to meet the challenge.
Thank you. So I think what you're saying is that there's a lot of places that need investment, and the money is really probably not enough that we're seeing being put into this. And so I will go to Rita's comment, which is the world has 6 months to avert the climate crisis. She's quoting energy expert Fatih Birol. He says, so the urgency is really there. So Alice from ACER is saying federal funds coming through ECSF. I'm not sure what ECSF is, but it's to organizations, i.e. charities, through community foundations available now. So maybe Alice will clarify that question. The other comment that I have right now is from Laura, and she was talking about the output-based pricing system that subsidizes gas-generated electrical generation. Is that something the city has anything to do with, the output-based pricing system?
I'm by no means a sort of expert on the energy system. Obviously, we have a local distribution company that connects into the larger transmission grid, and then by extension, the generators. Again, I think we would want the cleanest sources of energy possible. The output-based pricing system, I think that's something we could advocate for, but it's outside of the city's sort of authorities and mandates. But if you have any recommendations or comments on that, please do send them in. And if not to us to advocate for, certainly to your MPP or member of parliament.
Yeah. Okay. There's just one. I know we have to move on.
Yes, I'm being mindful of time. So if it's very brief, it's unfortunate. I'm glad there's so many responses, but we have a limited.
It's great, but this will just complete this one from Alice. The ECSF is Emergency Community Support Fund. Maybe that's what it is. To organizations like charities through community foundations is available now. That's a federal fund that Alice is pointing out to us. Maybe it's for all of us to know, including ClimateFast. So maybe we need to look into that. I don't know if you all have heard anything about that fund. Should communities be made aware of it? Have you heard of it, anybody on the panel?
No.
The Emergency Climate Support Fund, Community Support Fund, we think.
Thank you for sharing that, though.
Yeah,
okay.
I have heard of it. It's for community groups, and it's something that, we look in more deeply. The federal government just, I think, released it very recently. So something that community.
Okay, so I think that's it. If we have missed your question, maybe ask it again, because I've gone through what I've seen here on the Google Doc, and lots of good comments. And we need to move on.
Sorry,
So.
just to reiterate, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead and you were going to kind of talk about this as well, but I guess just to make sure that obviously we're happy to engage in this conversation, but more of the formal consultation and idea submission process is still going on until June 30th, right, Sarah? So for folks who have more in-depth ideas that they'd like to share, that will be another appropriate format to share that, just to make sure that the detail of everyone's ideas is formally captured, not just to this discussion today, but you know, individually as well. Because while we have our awesome ED folks here represented in TORR, not all of TORR is made up of climate action and environment and energy staff. So I'm sure we just want a written record of all of these ideas as well.
Thank you. And I think it's perhaps important for people to know that when it comes to federal government money, they normally would pass it through the province, but they're not going to do that now. They don't necessarily give money straight to the city. That's what we understood that was problematic. And that's where the Federation of Municipalities came in, the Canadian Federation. So it's maybe important for people to understand the actual transfers, but no matter where it is, it's not enough money. That I think part is really clear. And the city is just one of the players with the different levels of government. So they all need to hear from us basically. And right now you're giving us the opportunity for the city to hear from us, which we really appreciate. So I'm going to pass it to Rosemary for the next step. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yes, and I do really appreciate that the city has gone out of its way at this time of COVID crisis to be very creative and really work hard to get the feedback from the city, or from the public. It's get everybody, many people as possible to give in their advice on how we move forward. So that brings us to your homework. I know that many of the people who are watching on YouTube are members of community groups, either neighborhood groups or social justice groups or environmental groups. And so this is a question that I want you to take home with you and to take to your own groups and then come up with an answer. And do get in touch with TORR at the numbers or the email given. Plus, as was mentioned, do CC Sarah and Stuart. And this is a question that does come from the guide. So your homework is to think about what would you like to see the city work on with non-government partners like ClimateFast and other environmental, social justice, and neighborhood groups, and why? I also know that I believe it was Tamara who says is working on outreach to communities.
Yeah, so as Lynn, I'm sure I'd be able to reiterate, myself and Megan's focus is specifically on engaging with community groups and organizations and residents on climate action. So while all of this is happening, we have continued to do that and have quite a few partnerships already with some community groups on the go. So again, happy to this is separate from like the consultation part that's still necessary for TORR, but for actual work purposes and next steps on specific projects or ideas, you know, our virtual door now is always open. So please do connect with us, and we're happy to chat with you informally in your organization and your ideas as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, we're going to just wrap up now. I'd like to thank all the participants, Stuart, Megan, Sarah, and Tamara, taking time out this evening. I know you must be overwhelmed with all the work you have to do with responding to the COVID and planning for the recovery. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the audience, the people on YouTube who took the time to write in their questions. And, you know, if you didn't get your questions or your comments in, please, the whole point is to get us thinking and to keep the conversation going. But do your submissions in by June 30th, not too far away. You can fill out the survey that the link to in the YouTube chat. And you can email your submission to recoverybuild@toronto.ca. And there's also, if you do snail mail, better get it in the mail soon, but there is an address provided in the discussion guide. And again, the discussion guide was in the chat that you could download the link, or you could download it from the link. The city is going to be collecting this input, and it will be summarized and posted to Toronto Open Data. More information, including reports on engagements and the city council. Oh, sorry, more reports on these engagements and the city council on the city's rebuilding and recovering efforts are available online. And if you go to Recovery Rebuild, the website, I think you guys could help me with this. I just have it available online, and it's like underlined that I could click on it, but I'm reading off of a piece of paper. So would we just find that under on the website, toronto.ca/recovery rebuild? Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, well, I again want to thank everybody who was with us, and we've come to 8:30, ended on schedule. Lynn, do you have any last words?
Mary, can you hold on for 1 second? I'm just putting a last comment in the box so that people could email us if they want us to know, because we otherwise don't have your email necessarily unless you email us. So Lynn at ClimateFast.ca, and we really appreciate your comments and questions. And I am just going to post this little note of thanks for you coming as soon as I've got down to oh dear, email the city staff directly. I'm still a little couple of things over, so yeah.
Sorry, Lynn, just to be clear, this is going into the YouTube chat?
Yeah. Yes, in the YouTube chat. A big thank you for everyone for coming. And if you want us to ask a question on your behalf, you need to email us. Otherwise, go straight to the city staff. Those addresses are there in the chat. And we thank you very much for coming.
Okay, can we just, if the city staff wanted,
and I think we should thank.
Then I think we will be.
Yeah, can we say thank you to our technical staff too?
Oh, yes.
You didn't see what you do right now on YouTube. If we didn't have the help that we do from Ray and Sharon and Mark and Faria, as well as the folks that you see, we have a whole team, and we couldn't do it without them. And you're all welcome to join and get involved in any of the projects that ClimateFast does. So we'll say a big thank you to our tech team and to the city staff for making it a priority to come out in the evening to be with us and to hear the comments and questions people have brought. Thank you very much.
Sorry, we should also thank Colleen, who was our official note taker. And she's not on the technical staff, but she's watching on YouTube. So thank you, Colleen.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks, everyone. Really well done.
Thank you, everyone in ClimateFast. It was wonderful to see your faces. Hope everyone's doing well. And again, happy to connect.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Stay safe. Speak soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.